The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. When the Pharisees heard that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered together, and one of them, a scholar of the law, tested him by asking, "Teacher, which commandment in the law is the greatest?" He said to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the greatest and the first commandment. The second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. The whole law and the prophets depend on these two commandments." The Gospel of the Lord. My dear friends, today's Gospel or today's readings are all about love, the radical love of God for his people, and the radical love we are called to live out in response. From the very beginning, God reveals himself as a loving and compassionate Father who has a concern for the most vulnerable of his people. God requires this same compassion in our treatment of one another. And in today's first reading from the book of Exodus, we hear how the people of Israel were expected to treat the stranger. We read, "You shall not molest or oppress an alien, for you were once aliens yourselves in the land of Egypt." The Israelites had themselves been vulnerable, and just as God had pity on them, so they were to take pity on outsiders. Dear friends, very often the real stranger is not the person we don't know, but the person we don't want to know, or the person we refuse to love. That person could be a neighbor or even a member of our own family. We can have strangers in our own house, still waiting to be welcomed and to be loved. We all need strangers and neighbors to test the quality of our mercy. And Jesus sums up the message of all the prophets as well as the purpose of all God's laws in today's gospel when he tells us, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, and with all your soul. And you must love your neighbor as you love yourself." Dear friends, love of God and love of neighbor are two legs of our Christian life, and we need them both. Just imagine hobbling with only one leg. It's a bit hard. The love with which we are called should not be confused with the superficial sentiment that is often rooted in self. Jesus purified such shallow sentiment in demand that we should love as he has loved us. The love of Jesus, as we know very well, was anchored in the will of the Father and demonstrated in the life given to the Father's will. We proclaim the gospel to the world when we aspire to a love that does not insist on its own way, a love that is not resentful, a love that does not rejoice at wrong but rejoices in what is right, a love that bears all things, hopes all things, and endures all things. The commandment of love makes concrete demands, and that's why it's called radical love. Without love of God, or without love of neighbor, love of God remains a starlight figment of the mind. Without love of God, love of neighbor may end in a vague humanitarianism that usually does not last, especially when faced with disappointments. Dear friends, through love of God and love of neighbor, our discipleship of Jesus becomes total and authentic. Through both of them, we receive two things. We receive grace and mission. Love of God gives us grace, and love of neighbor gives us mission. So, dear friends, love God, love people, and make disciples. As I said, this weekend, we are celebrating Commitment Sunday for our commitment to Christ responding as disciples stewardship initiative. Thank you, Tito and Katia, for your time today and for bearing witness to our parish community on how, as individuals, as a parish, we can bring Christ to the lives of others. My dear friends, we now give each one of you an opportunity to reflect and renew your sacrificial commitment to support the mission of our parish. Each family should have received a commitment card and a program brochure this past week. If you forgot one at home, there is one in the seat. Please reflect about how you can renew your commitment to the parish. Let us now take a moment to complete those cards as our director of music plays some quiet music. Once again, thank you so much for your generous support and for your participation and engagement in the different ministries here in our parish. Feel free to put your card with your weekly offertory during the time of offertory. Now, let us rise to profess our faith.